Chapter 15. A Lake for an Orchard. In King Nicholas's great hall, the wolf Staley prowled backward and forward beneath the windowsill. The wicked magician Trayton had fed him a secret treat which made him jumpy. Nearby, the two kings, Prince Andor and Nicholas's advisers, including Trayton, were examining an unrolled parchment map of Ragnar. King Nicholas's realm was shaded in green, while King Harmon's realm was coloured turquoise. The map had been illustrated by the priestesses of the Junsong, who were skilled in painting and calligraphy. "I'm interested in your lake in Ralston County," said King Nicholas, pointing to a blue area on the map. "We only need to change the border slightly. The land on my side is so poor that the farmers can barely raise their crops. If we had access to that lake, they could fish." "But what about my subjects who make their living on the lake?" said King Harmon. "They can become my subjects. In exchange, I'll give you this tract of rich farming land up here in Bear County." Nicholas gestured to a spot on the border, which is full of beautiful pear orchards. "Queen Chloe will eat pear tarts every autumn. I have many orchards while you have few, and you have a large lake, and I have none. What do you say, Harmon?" "No one likes to be forced to do anything," said Trayton. "I certainly wouldn't want to leave one king for another." Harmon glared at the magician, astonished at the interruption. The warrior king had never liked Trayton, and often felt an uncanny urge to grab the man by the throat. He was puzzled as to why his friend King Nicholas trusted him. With his silvery white fingers, the unpleasant serpent ring on his thumb, and his flowery perfume. What Harmon disliked most of all, though, was Trayton's insolent manner. "We always tell our people our plans and let them discuss it," said King Nicholas. "Sometimes we offer some sort of enticement or reward." Harmon gave an impatient sigh. "What sort of enticement?" asked Trayton, his mind scheming. "King Harmon and I—" "We don't have to answer questions," Harmon snapped, unable to bear the magician's rudeness for one more minute. "We kings decide what we decide. We seek no advice, certainly not from fancy magicians." Hearing the anger in Harmon's words, Nicholas rose from his seat and asked everyone to leave the room. When they were alone, Harmon began his usual pacing. "I don't like that advisor of yours." "That's obvious," said his friend with a boyish grin. The two men had known each other since their childhood. Their friendship had put an end to the wars between Pavel and Ragnar, and they knew they could depend on each other whenever there was a battle with the Narrowlands. Years ago they'd agreed to keep a standing army, and each year they drilled all their countrymen in warfare, even during times of peace. Knowing their lands were secure had allowed both kings to create peaceful, prosperous kingdoms. "You don't like anyone that you haven't known forever. Trust no one. Isn't that your motto?" "Laugh at me if you will, but it's better to trust no one than to be betrayed," said Harmon grumpily, as he walked back to his chair. His boot grazed the tail of the wolf as he went by, and Staley uttered a low growl. "And another thing, Nicholas," said Harmon, "must you keep a wolf as a bodyguard? Wolves, wily magicians, it's not the tradition." "That's where you're wrong. Years ago, before we forgot the ways of the Junsong, our rulers always had wolves living with them. My father's wise man, Baruch, told me that." "Wolves are no friend of mine," said Harmon. "We don't know that wolves killed your daughter," said Nicholas, guessing his friend's thoughts. "The wolves of Ragnar have never touched humans. People tend to make up stories about things they fear. You know that." Vilmos stalked through the courtyard to the privacy of his sleeping chamber. He sat down on his bed, fuming. Typical of that arrogant Harmon, he muttered. Too bad for him, I now know enough to cause him trouble. Absent-mindedly, he fondled the opulent, embroidered bed coverings and began to piece together a plan. The rats of Bevel Castle had grown to love him and chewed on his bootlaces. He pictured the beautiful Chloe, with her iridescent skin of moonlight. Stink of blood, do I? Stink of death? I'll show you blood, lovely Chloe. I'll show you death. He turned Chloe's words over in his mind for the 1000th time. You wanted a king, not an executioner's son. Well, your king was stupid to marry a commoner with witches in her family. Vilmos recalled his humiliation, the day of the midsummer duels, when Chloe had dressed as a knight and beaten him in a sword fight, and impressed the king. You will marry me, Vilmos said. I'm glad I tore your baby from your arms, no doubt eaten by wolves long ago. This made him smile. The taste of revenge had whetted his appetite. Vilmos's fantasy of becoming king was growing. The more he brooded over his fantasies, the more they needed to be fed. If he killed Nicholas and Andor as well as Harmon, he could rule over both kingdoms. Together with Inico, the great sorcerer of the Narrowlands and friend of the venerated dragon, they would control all of Ragnar. Andor left his father's hall deep in thought. He strolled around the water fountain, kicking pebbles underfoot. He stopped to pick up a handful and began skimming them across the pool, making them skip once or twice, sometimes even 3 times. Behind the fountain there was a gap between the castle walls and the stables, giving him a view of the deep green forest beyond. Andor was a tall, quiet youth, slender and strong, like an odum sapling. Not quite a man, but no longer a boy. The odum of Ragnar was a mighty, unshakable tree that took time to mature. Andor wanted to be brave in war and adventure, but in his life so far, he'd never been anywhere without his father. He tossed another stone into the air and watched it drop. How he yearned to saddle his horse and ride into the green mystery of the forest. Maybe the time has come for me to strike out on my own, he thought. He pondered King Harmon's obvious dislike of Drayton. From the day he'd been pulled from the window seat in his father's den, Andor had also disliked the magician's wily tongue and too pretty face. And he'd never forgotten the vision of his mother trying to warn him from inside the crystal ball. But father says that anyone who befriends his wolf can be trusted. Staley is the best bodyguard I've ever had, Nicholas had once told him. He's brave and true and will attack anyone who tries to do me harm. Over the years, Andor had made a habit of watching Staley closely. He thought about how the wolf was always as docile as a cat around the magician. If anything, sometimes he even seemed timid. If the wolf trusts Drayton, who am I to doubt him?